your name. We asked you to check in and put your name in the chat, but I think we're pretty good because there's only a few of us here today. Okay, so our recipe, folks, this is, I think, the first time this has happened. We're doing Za'atar kebabs and an herby roasted potato salad, but we have some issues with sourcing, and we found out the day we were packing kits to go out. So you may have noticed and got an email that there were no green peppers. Our producer ran out of green peppers or left them at the warehouse. I'm not sure exactly what happened. So if you were able to get your own, great. If not, you don't need it. No worries. I just picked one up so I could demo how I like to cut them for shish kebabs. We also, you may have had basil in your kit. Mine did not survive, even though it was local fresh basil. So we're going to scrap that, and we're going to do really just a garlic scape pesto. If you have basil at home or other herbs you want to put in that pesto, go for it. But we're going to modify the recipe a little bit, and we're going to use our kitchen intuition to adapt. You also did not receive Za'atar seasoning in your kit, which was a real bummer, and we apologize for that. So Za'atar is a seasoning that you can totally make at home. I'm going to quickly demo how to do it, although I know most folks probably don't have those ingredients. Afterwards, we're going to talk through different things you can use to add to your chicken marinade. Okay, Irene, am I missing anything, or can I get started?
I think you can go ahead. We're ready.
All right, great. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm going to start making a Za'atar seasoning, and this is for you in the future if you ever want to make it. And it's really simple, and it's absolutely delicious. And then we'll talk through some other marinades for the chicken and vegetables. First, we're going to make our marinade. We're going to stick the chicken and vegetables in it and put it in the fridge, and it's going to sit for a minute. Then we're going to cut our potatoes up, get those roasting in the oven. They take about 40-45 minutes. And then we'll make a pesto while those are cooking of some sort. We'll figure it out together. And then lastly, we'll cook our shish kebabs, or our hopefully somewhat tasting Za'atar kebabs. You can do the kebabs in the broiler. We put this recipe in the broiler because most people have access to ovens. Most people don't have access to grills, but you can totally grill it. It would be delicious as well. Okay, so I'm going to get started. And I know that folks do not have all of these ingredients, but just bookmark this recipe. Maybe Irene, you can write it in the chat for how to make your own Za'atar seasoning. Okay, so I'm going to start off with cumin. I'm sure a lot of folks have cooked with cumin before. It's a really delicious smelling herb, and it's very potent, but we're going to use, we won't use all of this today. You can put your, you can always put these in mason jars and save them for a while, but I'm doing 1 part cumin, which is just a tablespoon of cumin, 1 part thyme, so just dried regular kitchen thyme, if I can get it open. So 1 tablespoon cumin, 1 tablespoon of thyme. Then I'm going to do 1 tablespoon of toasted sesame seeds. You can get these at Foster's if you live in Greenfield, or tons of other grocery stores. You could also use non-toasted, but I prefer toasted. Those are a huge part of the flavor. And then 1 tablespoon of sumac. Has anyone used sumac before or heard of it? It's a plant that grows here very commonly, and you may have heard of poison sumac. So this is not poison sumac. This is called staghorn sumac, and it actually grows like as a weed all around basically Western Massachusetts. It has like a beautiful red conical flower, and I made my own sumac powder by separating the seeds and grinding it in a food processor, but you can also get it super cheap and way easier, way less time consuming at, regular supermarkets, especially international supermarkets. So just call and see if they have some. Then we're going to use a teaspoon of like either marjoram, basil, or oregano. And for me, I'm using a mix of oregano and basil. I'm just going to use 1 teaspoon of that because oregano is pretty powerful. You could use fresh too. And then lastly, we're going to do a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of pepper. That's za'atar in whole. And then you mix it up, and for the you can use it in the marinade. Now, I know folks don't have this, and today we are going to talk through some other ideas of herbs that we could marinate with our chicken. So it's going to have red wine vinegar and some oil, salt and pepper, of course. And so I think what we're going to do, we'll offer up just some regular herbs that you have at home. Salt and pepper. I love Italian seasonings, basil, parsley. You could do thyme, oregano. All of those herbs would go super well in this. If you have garlic powder or onion powder, those would go very well in a marinade as well. And red pepper is super good. So we also put in the recipe Greek seasoning could work. Really, we're just trying to get a super herby flavor going with these shish kebabs. Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts of what they would want to add to a seasoning? I know people are probably busy cooking away.
I usually like to add smoked paprika always, or pimentón, as we make in Spain. I feel like always add some smoky flavor for grilling or broiling.
Do that. Good idea. Smoked paprika. Lovely. That's such a good idea. And I'm just going to show you quick kind of what the za'atar seasoning is. You can mix this with olive oil and use it like as a bread dip. It's like absolutely such a good taste. Sumac is super tangy. And if you have most of these ingredients, but not the sumac, you can actually just use more lemon. People use sumac to make a drink that tastes just like lemonade. It's just a super, super sour, delicious taste. Okay. So if you're still confused about what to add to our marinade herb-wise, you can write that in the chat. But I think what we're going to do is start prepping our chicken that we received. And I'm going to use Ziploc bags, but you could use a bowl and cover it in plastic wrap while it marinates for a little bit. And someone said more lemon. Perfect. Okay, you got it. So I'm going to drain the excess liquid out of this chicken. And you can do that by just pulling the chicken out of the bag. And folks, you do have skin on yours. If you want to peel the skin off, you can easily cut it. And I'm going to show you how to do that. If you want less skin, I kind of want the skin on mine, but you really can just use a knife and peel it back. So I'm barely even cutting. My knife is not as sharp as it should be, but that skin is going to peel right off. There are some tendony spots you might have to push a little bit harder. But yeah, you can totally take the skin off. Maybe this will be a good treat for my pup. Okay, and then I have a nice chicken breast. And I'm just cutting it off at the very end. And I'll do the same thing over here because I know folks often like taking the skin off. I don't think there's anything wrong with the skin, and I love cooking with it because I think it holds a lot of flavor, but it does also hold a lot of fat. And some folks want to cut that out a little bit. So, and here's like the fat layer and the skin. I can hold on to those for my pup. Okay, so we're gonna start. I'm gonna flip my chicken breast over, and there's kind of a natural line. We're basically just getting it ready to cube to put on skewers. There's a natural line kind of in the middle of the chicken that I'm gonna cut along. And you're gonna wanna use a sharp knife for this. And that's basically the tenderest part of the chicken that I'm cutting off. Okay. And then I'm going to take this breast, I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise. Hopefully everyone can see my camera well. If you can't, just let me know and I can adjust. So now I have 1, 2, 3 pieces. I'm going to do the same thing with my other chicken, cut it in half. I'm going to cut sort of the tender off. Right. And then I'm going to cut the whole thing in half. If you have any tendons or fat that you see, you can certainly cut those out. Now, the key with doing shish kebabs is you don't want too tiny of pieces. You want them to cook evenly, and you want them to stay on the kebab. And that's sometimes impossible because the way the chicken's shaped, they can't all be the exact same size. But sometimes if I have a skinnier end of the chicken, I give it more length. And if I have a larger, thicker end of the chicken, I cut it a bit shorter. So let me get these chickens placed in a way that you can see. For example, here we go. And this is not huge, it's not rocket science. Do your best at like cutting them to make them as even as possible. And we're going to finish cutting the rest of the chicken in chunks like this. And so we're doing a quick marinade. And sometimes if I'm doing a quick marinade, something that I do to sort of cheat the process is I poke holes in it with a fork. And that helps that marinade get in there quicker. So you're welcome to do that if you'd like. But again, no need really. These are still going to be nice and flavor packed, and anything that has the flavor of a grill or a broiler is super nice. Okay. And once you finish that, if you're already a step ahead of me, you can certainly put that chicken into a bowl that you can cover, like a Tupperware that's large enough to fit chicken and vegetables, or you could do 2 separate bowls, or something that you can put saran wrap on top. So,
Hey, Brooke, does it matter if you like poke the holes before cutting them or after cutting?
you could do either. I'll show, I mean, it's probably a little bit easier to do it before, but I'll show you after in just a second. I'm gonna wash my hands. I'm gonna get my fork. Okay. So you could just you probably need to use an extra hand. Let's see. I'm just getting each piece 1 little fork or 2. Make those holes go out the way through. That was like my single mom's trick to making really tasty marinated meat when she was super busy or just getting home from work. And I really think it works quite well. So that's what you could do. And then I'm going to use a Ziploc, and we'll get all of that meat into there. So we're going to kind of think of ourselves starting from scratch with this, since we don't have the Za'atar seasoning for this recipe. This is a vinegar-based marinade, so it's going to have a little bit of a zing. My favorite recipes for chicken on the grill or in the broiler have vinegar in them. There's a famous recipe in Buffalo called Kebabs that's mainly a vinegar marinade. I encourage you to look it up or check it out. So good. I'm just going to wash my hands quick, and I'm going to clean up my station a little bit. Okay, so we're going to do some vegetable preparing, and I'm going to throw everything I can into the same Ziploc bag, but if you don't have room, that's totally fine. We can always, you can do them in 2 separate ones. Easy peasy. I'm going to do the pepper first because some folks might not have that. I'll get it out of the way and give folks a chance to catch up. So I view the pepper like a square. And so I'm going to cut around the seed pod in the middle. It's okay if you get some, you can always pick them off. Because I want the biggest chunks possible for this. So that this bottom piece already has a hole through it for us. If you'd like, you can always cut out, sort of fillet that extra fluff. It doesn't bother me, so I'll leave it on. And I'm going to keep these fairly large. I'm going to cut them in half. This one gets 2 cuts. Kind of the same size chunks that we want for our chicken. We're going to want that for, so I wouldn't necessarily do this in half. I would do this in 3. I'll show you size for reference.
Kind of like a square, right?
Yeah. Yep. And again, if you do some pieces smaller than others, they'll just get a nicer char on them, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's nice to have variation. So I'm going to finish cutting those up quick, and they're going to go into the same bag with my chicken. Maybe I'll cut this a little bit off. Lovely. So, and we're going to construct these after they marinate for a bit. So we're not, you could do it all on the skewer, but it's hard to get the marinade on them if you already have them skewered. Next, we're going to go to our beautiful zucchini. So I've seen people do this a couple different ways. If you have a large zucchini, you can cut it in half. We're actually just going to use rounds. So I'll show you a couple of them, and I'll give you a size reference again. Now, the zucchini cooks pretty fast, so I leave these pretty thick. I don't want them to fall off the skewer and get all melty, so I want a decent size. And let's do a little. Here it is for size. And that's going to go in the bag too. Now, some other things I love putting on shish kebabs or kebabs of any sort are eggplant. I've put, what else have I done on kebabs? Why am I blanking? Well, obviously shrimp or different types of meat, steak.
Onions work very well too.
Yes, you're doing onions in just a moment. By the way, folks, I'm just peeling the most outer layer of the onion, of these fresh onions, if they're looking dirty. But if they're not looking dirty, or you were able to scrub some stuff off, don't worry about it. And for anyone interested, these are just like regular onions, except for they haven't been cured. They're young onions, green onions, spring onions, and the leafy greens are edible. So you can treat them just like scallions. And we're really just going to be using the bulb on the kebabs, but I do encourage you to keep the greens and use those for a different purpose. Or if it's like really thick at the top, you could probably skewer those as well. I'm going to use all of mine. And these don't stay together quite as well. But what I did was I just cut off this onion with a little bit of the end on it. And I'm going to cut off the root hairs. You don't need those. And then I'm going to cut it in half. And then you could, depending on the size of yours, you could cut yours further in half. But what I'm going to do is kind of separate it. And I'm going to take out some of the middle. And so we can use these flakes, kind of like I'll skewer this whole thing through the side. Maybe this one I'll flake a couple pieces. So that'll be one and that'll be one. And I'll show you that again because it might be a little confusing. So I've cut the edge. I can't really see because these onions, these beautiful onions. cut the end off. You can also cut it this way in little chunks this way. So 1, 2, and you can skewer it that way. I'll do 1 more or 2 more. Cut the end. I'm gonna cut this one in half again. You can separate some of the innards. So you have 2 chunks. And once more, this one's a little bit smaller. I'm gonna do these like that. If you still have I'm gonna cry. If you have a good section that you think you want to use to skewer and cook, you're welcome to do that. I might do it just for fun. So I'm removing some outer skins and trying not to cry.
I recently, someone shared with me that if you wash the onions, they make you cry less. I don't know if it's one true tip or just like another myth around onions.
Yeah. Well, I need to try that out because it like temporarily makes me totally out of my mind. Onions are a powerful thing. Okay. So I've got my bag is filling up quite a bit, which is fine because we've got all of our veggies in there. Now we're just going to work with the marinade. So as mentioned before, we're going to need olive oil, red wine vinegar, salt and pepper, whatever herbs you want, and some lemon that you're going to zest. So you can use whatever you've got for lemon zesting, even if you have like a cheese grater, that could work too. I'm just using this handheld one. I'm going to do the zest of 1 whole lemon. You should have 3 in your kit. You could even do more if you want, but I'm going to take a minute to zest the whole lemon. And that's going directly into the marinade. Now, if you have a lot of stuff going in and you need a lot of marinade, just double the recipe. Just do it again. Zest another one of your lemons. One thing to note is that it's much easier to zest while the lemon is whole. Sometimes I forget that, and I cut it in half and I juice it, and then it's a lot more difficult to get the zest off. And I thank you for writing all that stuff in the chat. I'm sure that's really helpful for folks. Almost there. A little bit of a workout, but it's a well worth it workout. Okay. I'd say that's about good enough. Okay. And I'm getting all that goodness into my Ziploc or bowl, if that's what you used. Probably made about 1.5 tablespoons of lemon zest. And then we're going to juice a lemon. You can do that next. So I just have one of these. It's really helpful if you don't have a lemon squeezer. What I find is helpful is making little holes with a spoon, kind of breaking each one of these segments and then squeezing. So I'm going to do this directly into my bag because I can. And I think it's just 1. I mean, you can always do more lemon juice, but you really only need the juice of 1 lemon. And so I'd say that it depends on the lemon, but if you want, I'd say 1/2 of the lemon is about 1 tablespoon of juice, if it's a good lemon. So you can go up to 5 if you'd like. The recipe, I believe, calls for 3, so you might do 1.5 lemons juiced into there. I think I'll do 1.5. Great. One more half, and we'll use the rest of these for pesto. So they will not go to waste. Right. Okay, I've got the juice of 3 lemons in there. I'll probably use that after. And then we're going to get out some measuring cup if you have it. Or, if you just have these kind of things, that's great too. We're going to grab your red wine vinegar, and we're going to do 1/2 cup of red wine vinegar. So it's quite a bit. And you're also going to want to use some of your olive oil, and we'll do a 1/4 cup of olive oil. You can eyeball it if you want. I'm just going to do half of my 1/2 cup. Perfect. And then now it's time to do some seasoning. So if I wasn't using a seasoning that already had salt in it, I would put about a teaspoon of salt in this amount. About a teaspoon of salt. I would probably do about a teaspoon of pepper, but if you're not just because I love black pepper, but if you're not a big black pepper fan, I'd avoid it. But yeah, I'm doing less than a teaspoon because I'm going to put some of the Za'atar I made, which already has a little bit of salt in it, but about a teaspoon of salt and however much pepper you like to taste. Like Irene suggested, you could measure out maybe a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika. If you're doing some kind of like Italian seasoning with basil and oregano, I put a whole, depending on if you're doing just this, I would do a whole tablespoon. We're really going to want it herby, maybe even 2 if you like herbs. I want to herb it up as much as possible. Like with my Za'atar that I'm making, I would personally put 2 whole tablespoons and maybe even do more. I'm going to see what that looks like. Let's see. And then it's kind of nice because you can close it up if it's in a Ziploc, and you can kind of squish it around, mix everything up really well. I mean, bowls are nice too. So we've got olive oil, vinegar, lemon juice, your seasonings, salt and pepper, whatever spices you really like. You could do a little bit of sugar in here if you wanted to. Yeah, and that should be it. And then this is all your veggies and all your chicken are going to go into the fridge and marinate. So just making sure it's all coated. Looks good to me. Let me put that more in front of the camera. I'm going to stick it in the fridge and let it marinate for a little. Okay, so now's a really good time.
What is the minimum time that it should be marinating for?
As long as you can, basically. But we've designed this recipe so it can be a quick cook situation. I think 20 to 30 minutes is fine. You could do it overnight if you wanted to. But I wouldn't say any longer than overnight. That was a good question. Okay. So I'm going to get my little station cleaned up and I'm going to get ready to make the potatoes. We're going to preheat our ovens for this. Preheat the ovens to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's the temp we're going to cook our potatoes at. Okay, so give me a minute just to get myself straightened up. And you probably need it too. Okay, the first thing I want to do here is I want to get my potatoes cooking because they take a while. And go ahead, do you have a question? Or did I just hear something? We want to get them cooking because they do take a while. And some of us are going to be broiling in the oven, not on the grill. So those two dishes will be competing for different temperatures. So we're definitely going to want to get moving on those. My favorite thing in the world to cook potatoes in is a large cast iron pan. If you have one, I suggest trying it. It really makes the crispiest potatoes. You can do like a sheet pan, and you can lay, if you don't want to get it dirty, you can always put some aluminum foil on it. I do that a lot too. Today I'm going to be using my cast iron pan. I like to use, for me, it's easy to have a bowl handy. And when I'm done chopping my potatoes, I put them in a bowl, mix in the oil, salt, and pepper to stick them in the oven. All right, so the smaller you cube the potato, the quicker they cook. Just keep that in mind. I'm going to start off by making sort of slices that are somewhat even thickness on these potatoes. These are really nice sized Yukons. They're huge. And then I like to go and make horizontal cuts. And then I turn it, cube it. So in general, this is sort of what my potatoes are looking like size-wise. Okay, and I'm going to put those into a bowl. The size I'm doing will take 45 minutes to cook. They just will. So I'm going to finish that up with a couple of potatoes. I think we gave her around 2 pounds. Now, potatoes in the oven, you can roast them with whatever spices you want. You can stick to just salt and pepper. You can do some garlic powder and onion powder. That's a really nice, easy one to do. You can do lots of herbs if you like. Maybe I'll throw some Italian seasoning in mine. You could do cumin if you like, if you have that at home. Just add whatever seasonings you'd like. But they're also just delicious with plain salt and pepper. This is roasting potatoes is my every single meal. Almost we have roasted potatoes because it's just so easy to toss them in the oven. Okay, just finishing that up. And I honestly could never eat more than I've already cut. So I'm not going to do the full 2 pounds. I don't need this guy. So, but please do, depending on your needs and who you're feeding. And I'm going to do some olive oil in here. So I'm going to do about a tablespoon. Tablespoon should be fine for 2 pounds. I'm going to do pepper to taste. And I'm not even mixing it yet. I'm just putting the stuff all in there. And then for our salt, I'm going to do about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt on those. Where did my salt go? There it is. A 1/4 teaspoon of salt, kind of leveled at the top, and maybe a 1.5 seems good to me. Or I guess for doing 2 pounds, you could do a 1/2 teaspoon. That should be fine for 2 pounds. Okay, so once you've got your salt and pepper, you can kind of experiment. Maybe you want to do some paprika, just a few dashes of that. I always play around with different spice mixes, never taking too many risks, but simple stuff. A couple pinches of Italian seasoning, or just leave salt and pepper, and that's fine. Give it a good stir. Get those nice and herb coated. I think the theme for today is herbs. If you do use garlic powder, just keep in mind that we're going to be putting some intense garlicky stuff on your potatoes today, so you might not want to use too much. Okay, and then you can line your sheet or just toss it in a pan, whatever you want to do. Spread it out. That's a key to crunchy potatoes. Keep them spread out. And my oven is still heating up, but once it's at the right heat, I'm going to set a timer for about 40 minutes and check on that. Am I moving too fast, too slow? Does anyone have questions so far?
I always wonder, but do you rinse the potatoes once you cut them?
I didn't, but is that a good tip to get extra starches off? Good. Irene, is that like a good tip to get extra starches off, rinsing them, or were you just saying?
I don't know. I was something that I always wonder. I should research about it because I know some people like to rinse them. But I wonder if that changed the cooking process because they will get moist and then it's a different texture.
Sometimes I feel like I'm always trying to have less moisture going into the oven to crisp them up, but I wonder if it's like helpful to take the extra starches off. I'm not sure, but I'm curious to look that up. Okay, folks, so we don't have our beloved basil, unless anyone here just has basil in their garden. So I'm going to do this because I'm assuming most people don't. We are going to be just kind of playing around with making a pesto that's just garlic scapes. And folks might be like, what is this hilarious looking vegetable? And what it is it's actually the flower of a garlic plant. So as garlic's growing, it's nice and tall, it sends out this shoot, which is a flower. And not yet, but we trim these on farms because we want our garlic to send its attention and energy into the roots. So these are kind of byproducts of farming, but they have such a short season and they're just so delicious. So I've used garlic scapes. I've like smothered them in oil and pepper and salt and cooked them on the grill. I've made garlic scape soup, and garlic scape pesto is kind of like one of the more common things people do with it. Oops, I dropped one. In order to get these scapes, like kind of, I have a small little food processor, so I'm going to cut mine up just a little bit to get them ready for pesto. And now pestos can have cheese, nuts, seeds, lemon juice, leafy herbs or leafy greens or leafy herbs, you know, like people do arugula pestos, kale pestos. You could do basil pestos, nettle weed pestos, parsley pestos. I really just think it's just such a nice thing to have in your fridge kind of all summer to put on potatoes or eggs or dishes that you're just whipping up quick, and it makes everything feel fancy. I make mine in so many different ways. I've used so many different, I mean, aside from salt and pepper, I've used so many different proportions of like seed to nut to cheese to leaf to garlic, and they all just taste delicious. I don't know how. It's kind of this magical paste. So we are going to, oh, thanks for sharing that. So people do rinse their potatoes to get excess starch out. I've done it a million times and enjoyed it, but it's always good to try new tips. So I'm going to put in all of my scapes because we might as well use them. But if you'd, I featured pesto recipes on the Pure Investor page several times. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, there's so many. We also like put out last year at Just Roots like green pestos of every kind, and it's like a a big chart of all the different types of pestos you can make. It's so nice to have. Yeah. I'm using all of my scapes. If you wanted to try other recipes, cut that back a little bit, and we're going to use our intuition and just kind of knowledge of ratios of salt and oil and pepper and stuff to make sure that we are not overpowering or underpowering or making this just a really good dip. So my timer just went off, or not my timer, my oven told me it's time to stick my potatoes in and start a timer. So as I mentioned, I'm going to check them at 40 minutes. Halfway through, I like to give them a stir, maybe once or twice I'll stir them, just so both sides get brown. And I put it on the rack closest to where the coils are. So I've got my garlic scapes in here. Now you could use garlic, I'd say like 2 cloves if you didn't have garlic scapes. And I'm going to mute you for a second so you don't have to listen to this. I'm going to do it dry first with nothing else but the scape. At a certain point, it'll start to slow down and you'll see it's quite fibrous, more fibrous than regular garlic and pesto. And so I want to start adding some other stuff to this to help break it down. And some really good things at doing that is salt and oil. For that amount, now that I see it all like squished up, it gives me a better understanding of like, that's probably about just maybe like 1/3 of a cup and maybe a 1/2 cup. So that's what I'm going to keep in mind when I'm deciding how much salt do I want in this, and how much oil do I need in this and such. So for this amount of garlic scapes, I'm going to use my, where did they go? Guys, I'm misplacing everything today. There they are. I think I'm going to try and see what does 1/4 teaspoon look like. That doesn't seem like enough. So I'll probably do another 1/4. That makes a 1/2 and another 1/4. And it can be quite salty. It's a spread, it's a paste, so it doesn't I make pestos quite salty and I think they're good. It's a sauce for you. So let's see, I did 3/4 3/4 teaspoon. And 1 sec, I'm going to do this once more. Cool. I'm going to do some pepper to taste. I'll probably end up doing what would be the equivalent of like a 1/16 of a teaspoon. It's already smelling so delicious and strong. And I think I'll probably do a 1/3 cup of olive oil. Now, if you want it thicker, use less olive oil. If you want it to be quite thick, you would use a lot less. But I want mine to be able to be spreadable. So good, Lorena, you got that 1/3 cup of olive oil. Now, you can add some additions at this point. So to me, once I blend this up and get a little lemon juice in it, it's like done. That's how I make a lot of my pestos. But you can also, if you've got like kids or people with sensitive stomachs, you don't want all that garlic scape or garlic, the chemical compounds in that, to be hitting a stomach so hard. So what people do is they add nuts or seeds, or they add cheese, and that really helps smooth out the pesto so it's not so like, that's garlic. So you can choose to use seeds, you can choose to use nuts, you can choose to use cheese. Some really good cheeses for it would be Parmesan. It's very commonly used. So if you have some of that, you're welcome to stick it in there. I'm going to give this a blend, and then I'm going to start juicing some lemon. And just to note, folks, we are going to be mixing this with mayo on our once your potatoes are finished. That won't be during class today, but you can add a couple tablespoons of this pesto into a half cup of mayo and mix that throughout. So it's not going to be so spicy and intense because it'll be mixed with mayo. So you could totally leave it like this, or you could add more. Now I'm going to juice 1/2 of a lemon into this pesto. And not only is that for flavor, but it also helps preserve the lemon and helps preserve the pesto for longer. This lemon is so large, it doesn't fit. I'll do a little bit at a time. So I'm doing about 1/2 of a lemon. So if it's looking too thick, what can you do? You can add a little bit of water, or you can add more olive oil. I wouldn't go too crazy with lemon juice, so. And guys, I know some people have just signed in. We apologize for all the substitutions we've had. If you get a chance, you can watch the rest of the video and hear what we've talked about so far for doing for these substitutions. And sometimes it happens. That's the thing when you're buying and sourcing local. Gotta be adaptable. Okay, so I've got some half a lemon juiced in there, salt and pepper, my garlic scapes. If you have basil, you can add that. I had about 1/3 cup of oil. I'm not adding seeds to mine, but you could add seeds or you could add cheese to yours as well. There are tons and tons of resources and recipes for different pestos. But what I like to do is just use your intuition, figure it out, try it out, see what you like. And it can be just your go-to, run out to the garden or to the farmer's market or to your CSA and pick up some ingredients and keep that pesto in your fridge so you can have it ready.
Mom, thank you for what is 7:45.
Mo bang service ko ang dami rin.
So I'm just grinding it again, so I'm muting.
I found one thing that when I do pesto and it gets very salty, it helps if I squeeze a little bit extra lemon juice. I don't know if you found that. I feel like it's a way that helps to balance it out, the saltiness.
Totally, absolutely. Yeah, acid is definitely your friend when you have too much salt. And just like our recipe says, I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of water just to get this moving a little bit more. And if you need to, you can add more olive oil. There's one. Two. Muting.
I'm just adding in the chat a couple options. If you want to add seeds, you can add sunflowers or seeds or pumpkin seeds. And for nuts, the classics are pine nuts, but I found that cashews, because they're kind of like neutral but nutty, they also work well. If you don't find pine nuts, which sometimes is hard to find and also very expensive. And for cheese, like Brooke said, Parmesan or Pecorino, they're very similar and they work very well.
Okay, so mine right now is this beautiful green color. It's just like spring, summer beauty. And what I'm going to do is add a little bit more of olive oil to mine. You could leave it as a paste just like this, and it could be great on sandwiches. If you want it more as a dip or a spread or something, you're going to want to add a little more olive oil. So I'm just totally playing this by ear. Let's see what, probably do I don't know, that was about 2 tablespoons more olive oil. And let's see how we do. Okay, gorgeous, perfect. I'm gonna put this out on a plate so y'all can see. So this is gonna be mixed in with mayo into our potatoes when those all finish up. Where's my favorite kitchen tool on the planet? It's like a beautiful light green color. And you'll find that garlic scapes unfortunately just have more fiber than regular garlic. And you'll have a little bit more fibrous. I mean, you might have a better blender than me, but you will get a little bit of fibers in there. It's just too delicious to care though. And just getting that out. Now you can put this directly into a mason jar if you'd like and keep it in the fridge. It'll last for weeks. If you do use a mason jar, I like to put like a little protective something around the jar lid, like a piece of parchment paper or something. Okay. And it is spicy and insanely delicious. So good. And I just want to show you the color. Too pretty. Too pretty. Okay. So my timer on my potatoes, I know this has been a lot of steps happening. My timer says 28 minutes. What I'm going to spend my time doing is prepping my shish kebabs. And, you know, we can even prep doing, mixing in some mayo with our pesto together. We'll do the mayo pesto first. So I'm going to use about if you did 2 pounds of potatoes, I would use about, you're not going to use as much mayo as you would for potato salad. I would use about 1/3 cup of mayonnaise. I'm going to put that in here, 1/3 cup. That's plenty. And then I'm going to use about 2 tablespoons of the pesto sauce. You can certainly use more. And we'll mix those two together. Probably could have used a bigger dish here. You can do less mayo, more pesto if you like the pesto taste, if it's not too spicy for you. It's going to make a really pretty light green color. And basically, it's kind of this, I started doing this with pesto and potatoes last summer, where as soon as they came out of the oven, I transported them into a bowl and I mixed in the mayo and pesto and sometimes fresh herbs as well. And it just, having these like oven roasted potato salad instead of just boiled potato salad was like my favorite thing ever. So I hope it's good for you too, or you like it. I'm going to do a little bit more pesto into mine and taste it and see if you like it. If you want to add more lemon, you could add more lemon. You could add more salt or pepper, though I don't think you'll need that. Yeah. So that's ready. So that's going to be when we won't be with you, but when you pull your potatoes out, when they're all crispy and nice, move them to a bowl and then put in some of your mayo pesto mixture and mix it all up while they're still hot. Okay, I'm now getting ready to assemble my marinated shish kebabs. So I'm doing a little cleanup. You're gonna want like a cutting board or, you know, what you've been working on, a nice surface, because it's a little bit messy. You could even lay some extra paper towels down like this to absorb the extra marinade moisture. And if you have any extra seasoning that you want to put on top, I'll show you, I'll demonstrate that in a moment. If you're looking for other ideas to use your pesto, we can probably put some of the, well, Renee, do you have ideas of what you like to put pesto on? Because people will definitely have some left over.
I think one of my favorites lately has been adding it to sandwiches. Just like a turkey pesto, and you know, when tomatoes is kind of one of my favorite summer sandwiches to go picnic somewhere, or if we go to the river.
Totally. Yeah, tomato plus pesto is pretty dreamy. Yeah, I love having it with eggs as well. I love put pesto pasta, like the easiest thing ever, butter and pesto on noodles. So good. Folks, I just took out some of my soaked skewers, and if you haven't soaked yours, they're probably going to get a little bit burnt, but you could try at least getting them wet to start. Soaking really helps keep the wood from burning. All right, and then I'm getting dirty here. So this is kind of like free form, like do what you want to do. You can either poke the zucchini through, oops, I'm on the wrong end. There's a sharp end and a dull flat end. You can poke your zucchini through this way. This is hard way, but it looks great like this, kind of like a lollipop. I always save a little bit of room towards the end so that they're easy to grab, flip, and turn. And I like to alternate layers, so I might do some onion, zucchini, mushrooms would be a really good one to add to this too. Pepper if you have it. Chicken. And mix them all up nice and good. I like to at least put 2 pieces of chicken on each shish kebab if I can. Yeah. And then when it's finished, just set it down. Just keep going through like that. So you got your onion. If you have pepper, you've got that. You could do eggplant. One thing to notice that I do, sorry, I've got a barky dog. I do have, usually doing it in the middle can be a little tough because the middle is seedy and they often, like, the seeds themselves fall out. If you're doing it on the grill, should be fine in the oven. That's why I kind of suggest doing it as a thick round going through, piercing the skin on both sides. Okay, pepper, chicken, make sure to skewer as much as you can through the middle. And you're just going to keep loading them up and being messy. And you actually, because these are pretty small skewers, you probably will use quite a few of them. Here we go. Oh, and I got a broken one. That's the hard part about using the zucchini that way, through the two skins. If you have any super big hunks that don't fit in with the rest, feel free to give those a quick chop. But you can, I'm sure you can feel already that the marinade has definitely, it smells really strong. It's sunken in. You see the herbs all over. It's gonna be tasty.
I was just thinking another veggie that I like to put in skewers is the tomato cherry. That also, they work very well.
Totally love doing that. Good point. Let's see if I can get this one better this time. There we go. I have metal skewers that I like to use, and those work super well. They're easier to put stuff on because they don't bend like these do. But these are not bad. And I have seen people reuse these wooden skewers before. There should be plenty in your pack that you'll have some extras. We'll see. And I like to kind of, if they're not already soaked in the juice, kind of get them in there. So folks, at this point, you are probably making your skewers and finishing that process up. In the interest of time, because this was a many step dish, what you're going to do is, if you want to grill these, that's totally great. Grill away. They're going to be very delicious on the grill. If you're not planning to grill these, if you don't have access to a grill, what you're going to do is you're going to broil them. And so broil just means you're going to put your oven on the highest setting. Typically ovens have a button that says broil, and you will cook them for a few minutes on either side, and you'll turn them. So we'll do 5 minutes on broil once the oven's up to temp. Then you go in and flip for another 5 minutes, and that should cook them all the way through. If you have a meat thermometer, you're going to want the chicken to be at 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 165, the like deepest part of the chicken. They're such small cubes that they're going to cook through. Another way you can check if you don't have a meat thermometer is check the juices. Are they running clear or are they running pink? If they're running pink, you need some more time. If they're running clear, you're in the clear. And so once your potatoes come out of the oven, mine have 18 minutes left, you'll turn it to broil. Then you'll stick these in there, 5 minutes on either side, and your potatoes are going to get tossed with some of your Mayo pesto, and then you're all set. I think it'd be really nice to serve this with like a fresh green salad or something like that, but really just the two of these together. There's so many vegetables. And
hey Brooke, Jerry and Andy are wondering if you move the oven shelf to the top.
Good point. Yeah, so depending on where your certain ovens have different locations for the broiler. That's such a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. You're going to want to move your oven rack closest to where the broiler is. So it might be up top and it might be on bottom. And you can look and see when you turn broil on, is it the top run that's lighting up or the bottom? And you're going to want to move that oven rack really close, because basically your broiler is supposed to be, the flames for your kebabs. So good question. You want to move your rack with an oven safe glove once you've removed your potatoes, to really close, not touching obviously, but as close as you can to that broil setting. And folks, I'm just going to take these kebabs and I'm going to lay them on my baking sheet. And you might, depending on the size of your baking sheet, you might want to do 2, or you might want to just do a few at a time so that you have room to flip them. Just like this. Okay. I don't want to keep folks on for too long. I'm going to rinse my hand off. Does anyone have questions, further questions? I know we're 5 or 10 minutes over. I want to make sure we get any questions answered before we step out. All right. Well, I hope
I think we're good.
What'd you say, Linda?
I said, I think we're good.
Great.
We don't
Okay.
have everything done, but
Yeah. Me either.
Slow getting towards the prep this afternoon, so, but we're gonna work on it, and probably eat it a little bit later.
Great. Well,
Marinate
enjoy.
it a little more.
enjoy the
I just made the pesto and it's delicious.
Yay. Okay, great. Well, everyone have a wonderful evening. Have happy celebrations.